Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Recruitment CEO's Insider's Guide, the show where we dive deep into the challenges and opportunities facing recruitment business owners today. So I'm your host, Katie Green, and today we are talking about a topic that has become increasingly important in the recruitment industry, and that is navigating talent acquisition teams. Now, with more businesses having talent acquisition teams in place, they put them in to maximise their own direct hiring. Many agencies are feeling pushed out. They're struggling to open the doors or maintain positive relationships. So here to help us unpack this issue and explore effective strategies to overcoming this is our expert guest and one of the Centred Excellence coaches here, strategic coaches here, Emma Warren. So Emma, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here.
All right, so let's start with the basics, Emma. Why is navigating talent acquisition teams such an important topic for recruitment business owners right now?
Well, Katie, more and more businesses, as you've said, are establishing their own talent acquisition teams, starting off with normally a talent partner and then expanding those teams further. So the traditional agency approach can be deemed as less necessary. And this has started to act as a barrier to entry for agencies who are trying to go out and win new business. So I've seen on several occasions with clients that the mere existence of a talent team puts an obstacle in the way of even attempting to get into that client. But also it can feel like it's hindering the development of your client relationship. It can lower the quality of a recruitment brief. And I think most painful is when an agency has had a long established relationship with a client and then a new talent person or team comes in, and that can feel a little bit painful for some.
Definitely. I mean, it's really insightful. And also this is something that I personally have experienced in my recruitment career. So I know exactly how that feels and how frustrating it is, but also initially how it really impacts the bottom line as well. So let's talk about those kind of challenges, if you like, then that's facing. What would you say are the main problems or challenges that recruitment business owners are facing when it comes to those internal talent acquisition teams?
So I think the first major challenge is it's acting as a barrier for new client development. Now, we would probably all agree that in the last 12 months, we have seen a shift in our marketplace. Whereas, just post-COVID, business development didn't necessarily need to be a huge focus for us. We were inundated with job opportunities. So I think a lot of people probably took the foot off the gas of BD. Now that has shifted and the focus is very much back on it. And so therefore this existence of talent is acting as a barrier to building new client relationships. The other thing is it's perceived as it's hindering the development of relationships. So I hear a lot, well, I've always ever dealt with the hiring managers, or I've always ever dealt with the director directly, and now I can't build those relationships because there's talent in the way. So that traditional approach for us of really getting close to our clients and understanding what they want is perceived to be getting watered down and damaged, and therefore affecting our ability to place and then directly impacting on the income that would follow. And then thirdly, it could be perceived, and I'm using those words carefully, but it can be perceived that the quality of the recruitment brief is getting diminished because, again, we're thinking we have to deal with talent, we might be on portals, we're just getting sent job descriptions, and therefore we can't get under the skin of what that requirement really is. So that's again affecting our ability to match, to place, to generate income.
Yeah, and these are all, very significant challenges that people are facing. So what are the frustrations then? If I'm a recruitment business owner, due to these issues, what would be the things that I would be experiencing?
Yeah, well, the first thing that's coming to my mind, and because I've been here and literally experienced this firsthand. Even at the end of last week, I had a scenario where this kind of reared its head slightly, and it's that
Yeah.
feeling of slight anger, and it washes over you, and you're already perhaps feeling challenged. Like I said, our market has maybe shifted, things are a little bit more tricky maybe than we would want them to be, so we're already perhaps a little bit uptight, and then this, something will come along with regard to talent, and you feel that sense of anger and frustration washing over you. And that's really coming from a place of you can't operate the way you used to. Things are changing, and you can't go directly to those hiring managers that you've had these great relationships with before. So the barriers are coming up. And this change makes this feel like a bigger problem than it probably really is. But at that moment in time, you can't see that. You're just experiencing that feeling of frustration and anger. I think at the sort of beginning end, that presence of talent is putting another obstacle in the way of that new business development. Something some people find challenging anyway is approaching BD. Don't like looking at the phone. They find that's a whole fearful concept. And now all of a sudden you've got another perceived barrier in the way. And they're fearful that talent acquisition teams are replacing us. Like we're being replaced is the other perceived sort of challenge and what people might be experiencing.
Yeah. And in a way, I mean, that is true, isn't it? And I say this from my experience when we worked a lot in the media agency space, and they weren't shying away from admitting it. They were actively building their own internal talent teams because they wanted to spend less on recruitment. And they saw that as the way to do that. So I guess in a way that there's truth in that, isn't there? It's then about, like you're saying though, what it doesn't mean that all talent acquisition is suddenly being taken away or is going to be replaced by this internal team, because they have a job to do, but there will always be certain roles that for whatever reason either they're tough to fill, or they just can't work all the vacancies, because some of these organizations are so big they just can't possibly have a team that's big enough to do that.
No, definitely not.
And often they're not necessarily people that come from a recruitment background, are they? So they don't necessarily have those skills.
Not always. And a little joke that some of my clients and I have had over the recent months is that they might often be failed recruiters. So if they can't cut it in this world, then there's a reason why they've gone internal. That's probably slightly controversial, but there may be some truth in that as well. So that's the way to cheer yourself up, guys, and just remember that.
Yeah, and I think that was our line. I put my hand up to say good or bad. That was something that we used to say, like, oh, well, it must be a failed recruiter. They've just gone for the easy option and gone in-house. And, I caveat that by saying, look, apologies, because I also know a lot of internal recruiters, and some that work for me that were absolutely excellent. So I was gutted when they went to be in the internal teams, because they are very skilled. So that's probably not fair to say, but maybe that was the bitterness,
Exactly. Maybe
the bitter pill to swallow. Okay, so let's talk about this, because we're talking about some misconceptions here, or myths, aren't we, as well, that we're sort of touching on. So what would you say are the misconceptions or myths about this topic that you think are important for recruitment business owners to be aware of, but also for us to address today?
I think the first one is what we said. The misconception is that we're being replaced completely. Not true. Won't happen. So that is a misconception. The presence of a talent team stops business development and stops you acquiring new clients. Totally not true. Another misconception. And thinking that there's no room for us or for the services that we provide, or actually that we can't develop those relationships through the business like we used to. I think that's also a misconception.
And I mean, we're calling them misconceptions, and they are that. You're absolutely right. And at the time when this situation happened for me, they felt very real. That's the thing. These things felt very real, which was, but they're trying to replace us. And well, how do we do business development now? Because we've got more gatekeepers, or that they maybe put some rules around it, which is they're saying, well, look, you're not allowed to go to Line anymore. Previously, like you were saying earlier, well, I always dealt with Line. Now, all of a sudden, I'm not allowed to do that. And so these things do feel real. I don't want anyone, to think that we're not saying that that is the case, because I think we are. What I think we're talking about here is, okay, so this situation has happened. So in other words, there's a change.
Yeah.
But what are the ways in which, what do we need to know about how to work with these internal teams? Because you're right, there are ways in which it's just a shift, really, isn't it? It's like, like we had with COVID, like pre-COVID, the market was buoyant and maybe you didn't need to do as much business development. And so you're working in one way aspect. Now, the landscape has changed. We're in a different situation and we have to make a change. And this is really what we're faced with here, isn't it? It's an opportunity to make a change.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, I think that it's absolutely real, in a sense of those feelings that you're experiencing, and it's absolutely real that things have shifted in a way that these talent teams weren't so prevalent across all industries maybe 10 years ago as they are now. You were saying, Katie, in media, it's had a strong presence for a very long time, but that might not be the case in all environments. So that is real. But I think the real need is to shift your mindset. And the first step, interestingly, this is what we talked about when we did our last podcast about Indeed, was around acceptance. Okay, so the first step in change and coping with change is to accept that it is now different, and no amount of feeling frustrated or arguing or maybe criticizing our talent colleagues is going to change the landscape. So acceptance is kind of like get peace with the fact that this is our new world, and how are we going to embrace it and really make it work for us. So are you happy for me just to chat through kind of what my steps would be in this situation, Katie? So the first thing I think which is useful is to think about this from their perspective. Okay, so if you were in their role, they've been tasked with filling positions and saving the business money. So what is critical for them to achieve in that role? And first of all, just as I say, come at it from somebody else's perspective, come at it from their perspective. So that's the first thing. And then, or the second, actually, after acceptance. Secondly, how would you like to be treated if you were the person in that talent acquisition role? Because I think what's happened, or what is happening frequently, is because there is contention, agencies come at them in a probably passive aggressive way and almost think about, how am I going to get one over on this person? I'm not prepared to accept, I'm just going to do what I've always done, and I'll show them that they need me, and that the managing director likes me, and that the hiring director, perhaps there's a little bit of that. So immediately you get the backup of the talent person, because you're not actually conforming to the world that they need you to. So the first thing is to sort of just rest from that and go, right, let's get on a level with this person. I will introduce myself. I am going to ask them, what is it that they need from me? What are their pain points? Which roles are they really going to struggle with? Because this is about our value again. This is the value that we bring to this individual, because if they're collecting all the low-hanging fruit, there are going to be roles that they struggle with, that they don't have the expertise in, which you may do. So again, if you're in a niche and that is the sort of thing you're doing day in, day out, you can add real value to the talent person. So ask them is then, what is it? What is their pain point? What is it that they need from you, and how are you going to live up to that in the same way as you would if it was a hiring manager or an MD or a client of any note? What do they need, and how are you going to deliver that? So have that type of conversation, and I think it's really important to do what they're asking of you and respect whatever boundary that they create. But also, when it comes to your needs, so if they're giving you vacancies, explain what it is you need in that process for you to be successful. So it could be, can I have a briefing call with the hiring manager? And if that's allowed, which most of the time it is, but in all of my dealings with talent teams, they are always happy. Once we've had a vacancy released, we can then speak to the hiring manager about it. It is never not an option. So set the boundaries as to how that relationship is going to move forward, and be respectful of it. And if you're not sure, check with them. And just those basics of doing what you say you're going to do and treating that relationship with the same respect as you would do client relationship will make no ends of development with that particular relationship. And the more you do that, the more they trust you. And once you build trust, then the whole the relationship goes to a different level. They'll start talking to you about advice, and they will need your consultancy, because let's remember, they're now in a very insular environment in one particular client, and you have the benefit of knowing the industry and what other people are doing. So when you build trust, you can start to give them advice and support, and then again you move that relationship to the next level. And in my experience, I have gone about it as, it's my job to now be that one agent that they will go to for anything, whether that's support, advice, or vacancies. And you can definitely achieve that if you follow the steps of respect and doing the right thing.
That's so true, because I recall when from my experience of dealing with many in-house teams, is on the outside, like you're saying, from us looking in, we assume, or they're coming in, they're trying to set all these guidelines, they're giving us all these barriers, they're trying to keep the line managers away from us. And actually, after building, like you're saying, relationships with these people, I realized actually how lonely and insular they did feel, because very often they're not actually always welcomed by the line managers, and they're treated, they can be treated quite badly, which is, they're flung briefs, or not even given a brief by the line managers, told, go and find me one of these. So they have no job description or anything to work from. They have a lot of measurements that are in place, things that they have to achieve that actually make their job very, very difficult. And so the line managers don't get back to them, they're chasing them, they're and when you start to ask, you're right, great questions, and really start to understand what their problems are and how they're targeted, and what their frustrations are, it opens up to a whole new reality of what's actually going on. And then once you're clear with that, you can see how you can add value to that process, and then really support that individual to be better at their jobs and make them look better at what they're doing. And you're right. And then that trust is built up, and it's a very different relationship.
Absolutely, because I think you're quite right. The majority of these companies, especially when they are building talent, the hiring managers don't want this change either, because they're going through exactly the same emotions as we are. It's changing the way they've always done things. They perceive it as an additional obstacle that they've got to go through. So if you think about it from the talent partner's perspective, they're getting it from that angle, and then they're getting it from us. It can't be a particularly pleasant environment to be in initially, until again they've got to go and build that trust with those hiring managers themselves. So the more we can support them in that, the better.
Absolutely. Okay, and so any other sort of case studies or data that supports this kind of approach that you want to share with our
Yeah.
listeners?
So I think those examples are when I've already got an in with a client, and
Yeah.
then the talent team becomes a part of my life, and then that's how I have to sort of build those relationships up in a client that I've already got. When it comes to clients that we don't have in a business development situation, I think the best solution has been getting referred to the talent partner by somebody in the business, whether that's someone more senior than them, or certainly someone who's got clout within that organization, is the entry point. Because I think, again, from talent's perspective, they've got a panel of agencies they're already using. They're probably being a bit of a pain in the neck, most of them. So they're thinking, why would I want to add any more to this? Okay, so if you're thinking approaching them directly, they're probably not going to be overly receptive, if truth be told. And also, they don't know what separates you from the approach they had yesterday from another agency, because claiming to be all things and the rest. So to me, the best way of getting entry to new clients is that referral. So who do you know in the business who knows you already, that can testify to your level of experience and to the value that you bring, and get them to introduce you to a talent partner? They might want to really work with you because they can see that you're going to deliver really good candidates quickly in their market. You've given them all the reasons how you solve that problem for that hiring manager, and they should be the ones that get you onto that PSL, and then you start to build the relationship with talent. So, and I think, again, in my experience where I've done that, I haven't faced any issue with talent if it's been referred by another person in their business for all the right reasons. I then get introduced. I'm very respectful. I explain from the outset, I work with a lot of other talent teams. I understand the boundaries that exist, and I'm more than happy to work on that basis. And then we go and have a new relationship.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think what you're explaining there is exactly that. It's like that right approach, isn't it? An explanation around that. And I'm always surprised, you know, again, the other thing to have a look at here is, because you might be thinking, well, I don't know if I've got people that can refer me, like, have I got contacts? But we're talking about your clients and your candidates, aren't we, that could be contacts into that business.
Definitely.
Yeah, that could support you into doing that. And also know that sometimes it might take a couple of, you know, we always say the fortunes in the follow-up. It might take a couple of approaches before they start to entertain you. And this goes back to what you were saying about building that trust, building those relationships, letting them see you being visible and valuable, and knowing that, you know, it's like that courting process that has to happen before somebody's going to say yes. Now at this point, you know, I'm happy for you to take a brief on, but also don't give up on the first or the second approach, because that's something else that I sometimes see happen with people, is they think, well, I had that conversation, they told me that, you know, it's a tight PSL, they don't need support. You know, okay, at the moment they don't, there are not now, but they might be.
Things change, you know, definitely. You know, agencies come and go. So whereas they had a panel of 10, you know, in 1 year, 2 people might retire and decide to hang up their boots. They've now got a panel of 8, and there's an opportunity, you know, to, always accepting no after a first attempt would be the biggest mistake anybody could ever make in our profession. You know, this is a long game, and I've got one particular example with a client. It took me 5 years of knocking at the door of a client to get a yes, and the key to it in the end was a referral. I used to lovely days of BNI, schlepping across the county at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I put them on my list one day of, I'd like referrals into this business, please. 5 years later, boom, got straight in off the back of a referral. So you cannot underestimate the power of that technique. So I think the other thing to bear in mind as well, which we haven't mentioned, is if you consider a size of an organization, certainly like some of the ones that we're dealing with, it's impossible to navigate every single hiring manager across the size of this business because there's hundreds of them. However, build a good relationship with talent. Well, they've got eyes on all of the talent, all of the roles coming up. So actually, you only need to really impress 1 to 5 people, however big their talent team is, start getting access to hiring managers that you potentially would never have even reached out to before. So that is a real tick in the box of how this can benefit you as opposed to not benefit you.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. When you've got somebody in the insiders, eyes and ears, you're right. Once you get those people on side, it can be very, very beneficial and a competitive advantage to you. Okay, great. So what are the key takeaways you want our audience to gain from today's episode?
Okay, so key takeaways, I believe, frame correctly. Working with talent acquisition teams can be beneficial for your agency. Okay, it can improve your income, not diminish it. Talent teams can introduce, as I just said, agencies to new areas of the business that you haven't actually worked with before. Once again, improving the benefit. And adapt your techniques to get in front of talent through referral, and hold your value proposition at the heart of your approach. What are you going to deliver? How are you going to solve their problem rather than thinking about it from your perspective?
Brilliant. Well, Emma, thank you so much for sharing these insights. It has been incredibly valuable. And I hope if you're listening, you will walk away with at least one thing out of today's episode that you can put into practice and start doing. So I really hope this has given you a boost and the answers that you need so that you can start not just seeing those talent acquisition teams maybe as a barrier, but actually as an opportunity for you. Now, Emma, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I hope you found this episode useful. So be sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to this podcast so that you can join us for more insights and strategies into the recruitment industry and how to navigate the challenges of today's world. And if you want our framework for how you build that £1 million plus, that 7-figure recruitment business, you can click on the link below and we will show you exactly the plan that you need and map to do that. So from today's session from Emma and I, thank you so much for joining us today. Take care until we see you another time.